Hello and welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and hopefully you're enjoying Sunday, and it's a special Sunday after all. It's Father's Day this weekend. I can't really talk about the history of Father's Day as such, mainly because it's relatively a modern thing. I say relatively modern, it's probably something that stems from the early 20th century. However, some people say, well, it can actually go back to the Middle Ages. The sad thing is, Father's Day, as we know it today, is relatively a modern celebration. Mother's Day, on the other hand, or Mothering Sunday, we did in a video back in March, I think it was, and therefore Father's Day, we're not going to do a video on it. But for all those parents out there, all those dads out there, happy Father's Day. Anyway, today's video is all about archaeology. Yes, it's a topic, as I keep on saying, is a bit of a passion of mine. And in a way, it was my dad that got me interested in archaeology, mainly because if you think back to all the archaeological excavations Worcester ever had, the biggest one, the one with the most impact, has to be really the Dean's Way archaeological dig. And when I was growing up in the late 80s, my dad used to take me down to that archaeological dig every single weekend, every Saturday, like clockwork. My mom, my sisters went shopping. My dad took me straight down to the Dean's Way archaeological dig. I spent most of my time there, upsetting, annoying, and just being a pest really to all the archaeologists down there. Interestingly, some of the archaeologists that I now work alongside, so it's quite an interesting one really. The Dean's Way archaeological dig had a massive effect on me, I would say. In a way, it's given me the passion to take up archaeology, but also to start up Discover History when we did in 2003. So in a way, even though we're not talking about Father's Day, it's linked to it. It was my dad that got me interested in history and archaeology from a young age. So what we're going to talk about today is not finds, not how to clean them or anything like that. We're just going to look at how archaeological excavations take place. What are they looking for? How is it done? That type of thing. So a whistle stop on the procedures that archaeologists will go through. So, starting from the very beginning, it's very, very important to highlight the fact that archaeological fieldwork is pretty destructive stuff. In other words, when you start going down through the layers, you are destroying those layers in history. So, archaeology doesn't just happen because they want to dig. It usually happens because they are rescuing archaeology. Maybe they're putting a new pipe in, maybe they're building a new road or a new set of apartments or flats. Then archaeology is very useful to rescue what is there before diggers and before construction starts to take place. And we see that all the time. You've only got to look at the archaeological excavations in Dean's Way, look at the archaeological excavations in the early 2000s in Newport Street, for example. These were digs that took place before construction and development, so they are good ideas. If archaeologists do end up with funding, they may look at doing an archaeological excavation or a community archaeological excavation. For anyone that's interested, if you join the Council for British Archaeology or went on their website, you can see where there are community digs taking place and you can take part in them. It's an interesting thing. Abroad, if you do archaeology, you have to be 100% qualified. In Britain, there is a lot of voluntary digs, community digs that you can get involved with. Anyone of a certain age as well, children for example, can also join their local young archaeology club. There's so much out there that you can get involved with. So we're not going to talk about a rescue archaeological dig. Let's imagine we've had funding for a completely new dig. Let's say we're going to dig over there or over there. What happens first is a lot of desk-based research, and that's really, really important. In other words, you don't just dig a hole. You could, for example, look at old maps. This isn't that old, but it gives you an idea. You could look at old maps, and that may give you an indication of what used to be there. Even now, if you look at Ordnance Survey maps, for example, you may find on there something written in italic writing saying moat or maybe castle site or something like that, and that would give an indication that there was probably something there to start with. So it gives you an incentive to want to put together an archaeological plan to get in there and answer a lot of questions. Another thing that they might do is have a look in the old records. Archives are absolutely fascinating. There may be documents talking about a manor house or something like that which is long gone. So you can gather lots and lots of information before you put spade into the ground. There may even be something known as a field walk. That's a field walk going on just there. These are photographs, by the way, that I use when we describe how an archaeological excavation takes place for school children, or even when we do talks. And a field walk is literally walking a field, seeing what there is on the plough soil, on the top soil. In a video, when was it now, about April or May time, I said one of the best things you can do at home without digging is to go and have a look at your flower beds. Go and have a look at your vegetable patch. Maybe you have an allotment, have a look there and see what's on the top soil. You may pick up the odd bit of pottery, a bit of bone, anything, and it may indicate that there was something going on there before you had your garden, before your house was built. Then we get a little bit more scientific. Some people will survey the ground using things like a metal detector. There's a time and a place for a metal detector. Metal detectorists are very useful when the dig is taking place to actually go through all the soil that you've excavated. In other words, going through the spoil heap in case archaeologists have missed something. So it's a way of seeing in the ground without actually digging. Sometimes, as I said, you can damage a lot of archaeology by putting shovel or spade into ground. So it's good to actually do this non-invasive, shall we say, archaeological groundwork, this archaeological surveying before you actually do anything. There's a lot of technology available today. One of my favourites is LiDAR, and if you go online you can actually look at the LiDAR photographs for Great Britain. Not every area is covered yet, but you can have a look, and it's very clever. Lasers fired at the ground and it comes back with a picture. It doesn't matter if there are crops in fields, it doesn't even matter if there's woods in the way, it will still tell you what the surface of the ground looks like, the lumps and bumps. When there is a particularly dry spell, as there was a couple of years ago, you also get things like parch marks, and obviously the grass, for example, will die off if there's not enough soil beneath them. In other words, if there's a wall or if you've got lush grass, it's probably because there used to be a ditch or something like that under there. You can also look at the height of crops. Crops grow better and taller when there is a lot of soil beneath them. If there's a buried wall, the crops will be weaker and much shorter. Then there's other things that you can look at, lots and lots of survey work, aerial photographs for example. They're good in black and white and in colour because you can pick things up in black and white that you don't in colour. We've also got what is known as a geophysical survey, geophys as they used to call it on Time Team. There are a number of machines that can be used for this, and it's all not invasive. You're not digging in the ground, it's all looking through the ground without actually damaging anything. This is one type of device. There are many other ones, including ground penetrating radar, and basically it takes pictures of what's below the surface, and as I said, there's quite a few different machines being used for that. This is one such picture that you get, which shows you a distinct linear object. In nature there are not many linear features really. Nature is very ad hoc, whereas anything linear could be, not always, but could be something that is man-made. And what you have to remember about archaeology is we're looking at man-made things. That's what archaeology is. It's not looking for dinosaurs, for example. That's paleontology. But eventually, if the ground looks good, all the evidence is there, the archives, all the maps and that look as if there's something there, then a test pit could be dug, and this is something you can do in your garden as well. Maybe we could do a video on how to do this, and it's literally a 1 metre square hole in the ground, and all you're doing is testing the ground. Is there any archaeology below the surface? But eventually you will have to put in the ground an actual excavation, a trench as it's called, and the surface work, in other words taking off the grass, the topsoil, the subsoil, is usually done with a digger. And the digger is often referred to in the archaeological world as the Great Yellow Trowel, and that's exactly what it is. That's always supervised, so you will usually have archaeologists wearing their health and safety hard hat, and they're going to look every time the digger scoops soil away to ensure there is nothing on the surface that's being damaged, for example, a skeleton. Eventually, however, you then get the heavy work. That could be moving the soil by hand with spades and shovels, maybe even a mattock if the ground's compacted. And then finally, the troweling back. In other words, cleaning up the surface of that soil. And you keep going through each individual layer, recording it as you go. So there we have a person using the iconic trowel that's used by archaeologists all over the world. You will also notice in this drawing you have got lines marked out in string and 6-inch nails. It's your standard procedure for marking out where you're going to dig. This is another picture. This is of a large archaeological site, and this one's not in Britain, but it just goes to show how worldwide an archaeological dig is. There we go. Lots and lots of people working together, all working together to look for evidence of people of the past, which, as I said, is what archaeology is all about. As this is done, archaeology will be found, and it's the norm really to take it out the ground, record the context, record where it came from, and pop it in a little finds bag. There's my piece of archaeology. It goes in the bag. The bags are all recorded with a certain code which will tell you what site it was from, the trench it was from, and even the context, what bit of the soil it was found in. Eventually, however, we do have to record everything. Recording is such an important thing. This is a group of archaeologists recording the levels, in other words, the depth of the soil, the depth of the context that we found. And then there's also a vast amount of photography that has to take place, including the drawing, which is actually a little specialism of mine. I do love standing over a little grid, drawing the archaeology in the ground, every little pebble, every little speck of archaeology that's there. Recording it, including filling in the site record, the site archive as it will be known, is really important because it allows people to look back in the future, maybe even opening up trenches that had been filled in or backfilled when time restraints meant that you had to stop the dig. Then the rest of the stuff really takes place off site. That includes the washing and cleaning of the archaeology, and there's a special way of doing that, and we may do a video just on that, especially if we decide to do a video on test pitting, so you will know how to look after your finds. They're definitely dried. It's very important to prevent mould growing on them or even metal things going rusty. And then eventually you get the full study of those finds. You may be looking at them in great detail. If there's human remains, for example, just like Richard III, as we showed the other day, they will be studied fully. Human remains are generally studied and put back in the ground, but most artefacts are then cleaned and will make their way into a museum. For example, this little clay pipe here, all with its separate little code on it telling us where it came from, the trench, the context, and people will be able to view them for centuries afterwards. My favourite bit about an archaeological dig also is the fact that eventually people write up the study, and that will produce a huge book like this one. This is one of my favourite books, mainly because my dad took me to the Dean's Way Archaeological Dig way back in the 80s, 1988, 1989, and amazingly, this is the actual study, the report for the excavations at Dean's Way, and that came out not that long ago. And I'm not surprised because there's a lot of material to study and a lot of news histories, shall we say, of Worcester, and in particular the Dean's Way area. This is a really good book if you get a chance to buy it. It is available from the Hive when they open up fully later on. So hopefully that's given you a little whistle-stop tour of how an archaeological excavation. Like I said, if you want to get involved in community digs, you can go to the Council of British Archaeology website. If you want to get involved with archaeology, if you're a child, the Young Archaeology Club, Worcestershire has a very good one. And it's one of the ones that cover a large area because they've closed a couple of the ones in places like Birmingham. Anyway, on that note, have a good weekend and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.